So moving, of course, all of that blood around, right, from the respiratory surfaces all the way to the capillary beds in the tissues where the oxygen is needed, right, is up to the organization, of course, of the circulatory system. And there's actually many different ways in which, many variants, even within just vertebrates alone, different groups of vertebrates, in how this is structured. The way it is structured in mammals as well as actually in birds is that we have essentially two interconnected but distinct circuits associated with that circulatory system. We have one circuit where deoxygenated blood is moved through the respiratory surfaces which are associated in both mammals and birds, obviously, with the lungs, right? So these, of course, are the pulmonary capillary beds associated with the lung tissue, right? And then returning basically back that now freshly oxygenated blood, which comes back through towards the heart. So it starts in the heart as deoxygenated blood, makes a loop, comes back, oxygenated now from those capillary beds into bigger and bigger and bigger vessels again, right, towards the heart. This is what we call the pulmonary circuit. Pulmonary is just in reference to the lung, of course. The other circuit that we have is we now have this freshly oxygenated blood that just returned now to the heart, right? And it is pumped out again from the heart, now this oxygenated blood, through another set of blood vessels, right, that makes a different circuit that now moves that blood, and it branches and branches and branches, to ever finer and finer blood vessels, of course, but moves it now into the rest of the tissue, where this freshly collected oxygen in that blood can now obviously be given off again to supply oxygen to these respiring tissues, such as our muscle cells that might need it, right, if we're working out in particular. And then this, of course, also, this is what we call the systemic circuit. So systemic just refers to the rest of the system, basically, of the body, right? And so we're returning then that blood that is now progressively deoxygenated as we're, of course, using the oxygen along the way in those capillary beds again associated, right, those systemic capillary beds associated with all of these tissues where all of the oxygen is given off. And then that freshly deoxygenated blood returns again towards the heart. And of course, once it returns, we're pushing it in now, or the heart is pushing it in back into that pulmonary circuit where it can move back towards the lung tissue, of course, and pick up more oxygen, right? So we have these two loops that obviously, once you make a round through both, you're back where you started and you're ready to go back into the loop where you initially started, right? In our case, we started with a pulmonary circuit. Both of these loops obviously come back towards the heart. So the blood vessels that come out of the heart are what we call arteries, and those that return blood towards the heart are those that we call veins. And as you might imagine now, right, we're moving blood away from the heart into two different circuits. We have the pulmonary circuit, where we're moving from the heart, right, deoxygenated blood away from the heart into the lungs. So those are arteries that move deoxygenated blood. We call the main one that leaves the heart towards the lungs, the pulmonary artery, in fact. Makes a lot of sense, right? And of course, we have another big artery that is moving blood out of the heart, right, and then splits up into smaller ones, which pushes out the oxygenated blood. The main artery, the big artery that is leaving the heart, is called the aorta, and you may have heard that obviously before, right? We then also, of course, have these big veins that are returning. We have the pulmonary veins. There's more than one now. There's actually two from each side. From each, we have two lungs, right? And so we have two from each that come back towards the heart. Those are the pulmonary veins, and then we have two different, what we call the vena cava, which are the veins that come from the two main regions of the body, the region that lies above the heart, so my arms or your arms, right, and anything here in the upper region of the neck and everything, and right, all of the blood that moved into the head, of course, returns through the superior vena cava, right? So this is the vein that returns this deoxygenated blood now back to the heart from the top portion. And we also have what we call the inferior vena cava, which inferior from down below, of course, right, which brings all of the blood back that was sitting below the heart in the body. So the lower torso, and then into the legs and lower extremities and so forth and so on. Right? So these big groups of blood vessels. So we're actually really lucky in that we are given, or were given, one of the or two of the specimens actually from one of the other courses, a 400 level course, Comparative Anatomy, taught by Professor Frazetta. And they're dissecting actually multiple kinds of organisms, all the way from invertebrates through various vertebrates, so that we can take a look at what, not just diagrams that are nice to look at, right, but they differ a lot from what it actually looks like in the flesh, right, in terms of they're sort of idealized, and they don't really give you the richness of the morphology when you actually look at a real specimen. But let's look a little bit over his shoulder, and let's first look actually at the dissection of a mammal, of a cat, to look at how the circulatory system is actually laid out in a mammal.
So we have our common cat, Felis domesticus, and we're going to make an incision on the thoracic area, and then I'll come over on both sides and open up the lateral portions, and then I'll have to actually cut through the sternum and the rib cage so I can break it open and spread everything so we can see the internal structure. So we're into the thoracic cavity, but it still doesn't want to pull apart because we still have the diaphragm attached, so I'm going to cut that away. Usually what I like to do so that this will really open up a lot better is I'm going to reach down on either side of the rib cage and snip the ribs closer to the spinal column, and then that'll allow it to lay open better. So, moving the lobes of the lungs out of the way, we have our heart centrally, still within the pericardial sac, so what I'm going to do is cut that away to expose the rest of the heart. Here you have the aorta coming up. See if I can open this well enough to show. The aorta is coming right here, up from the left ventricle. You have the aortic arch looping here. Everything below here carrying blood to the lower portion, oxygenated blood to the lower portion of the body. And these two carrying oxygenated blood to the upper portion of the body. Here. So you have 3 lobes of the lungs on each side, so 1, 2, and 3 on your right side, and 1, 2, and third one here on your left side. Both of them are receiving deoxygenated blood through the pulmonary artery, which would be here on the right hand side and here on the left. And what you're not seeing is once those arteries enter, you have capillaries that are then leading all around the interior of the lung, leading to the alveoli, which are then having oxygen exchange. So after we have the trade-off of carbon dioxide for the oxygenated blood is now returning through these 2 smaller pulmonary veins into the left atrium of the heart.